Good morning and welcome to the Mobile Overview Report webinar for the third quarter of 2017. That would be July through September of 2017. Nice to have everybody here this morning. Let me do some quick introductions. I am Ken Jones, the Vice President of Marketing for Essentia Mobile. I have over 15 years of experience in the mobile industry. I've worked marketing and consulting and financial analysis for the industry. And today, my more serious co-host is Jonan Sataris. Hello, say hello.
Hi Ken, you're getting better.
I'm getting better.
My name is Jonan Seteros. It's a Norwegian name. I'm based out of Norway. I'm the Vice President of Products and Innovations at Mobile. I've actually been in the mobile industry since the last century, both in telecoms and web and now Essentia Mobile.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's do a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'll do a little introduction about who Essentia Mobile is. We'll talk a little bit about what device intelligence and device detection is and how that feeds into the information that we collect and show to everybody in the MOVR report. And then we'll get into some of our spotlight reports. The first one will be around the iPhone 8 launch. We'll compare it to the Samsung 8 launch that happened back in April. And we'll talk about how iPhone market share is changing in the last couple of quarters. We'll look at image acceleration on mobile devices. Images are one of the main reasons why a mobile device browsing experience can be very slow and frustrating for users. And we'll see what can be done to improve that by accelerating the images. We'll look at device orientation. We've looked at this in past quarters, and there's some new information that we have that gets a little more into the details of how devices are held when they're used. We'll look at virtual reality and the browser world's readiness for virtual and augmented reality. We'll look at the JPEG 2000 and JPEG XR file formats. There's a reason why we are interested in those, and we'll go through where those are used and how ready certain browsers are to support those. We'll also look at Indonesia. That's our spotlight country for this quarter, and then we'll get into a couple of our standard reports and tell you how the mobile industry has been changing in the last quarters. And then, of course, we're always open to questions that you might have or suggestions for further research. So what is mobile device detection and what's it used for? We are the leaders in mobile device detection, Essentia Mobile is, and we have a product called Wurfel that has been the industry standard for mobile device detection for the last decade. And it's used to help address poor mobile user experiences. You can use the information if you know what device is requesting a page. You can do all sorts of things to optimize the size or the navigation or target the content specifically for a user. You can also use this to improve slow loading images, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And also you can perform analytics on what types of devices are requesting your pages. For many companies, this can be a multi-million-dollar problem and can cost lost sales or abandonments on web pages. And the mobile device detection can help resolve those issues. In terms of the MOVR report, we have been putting this out since 2014, if my memory is correct. And we also have online tools for people. If you want to go to our MOVR page, which is at this URL here, we have a MOVR visualization tool that allows a lot of very standard reports that we report on about the operating systems and market share for different different devices or form factors, tablets versus smartphones, available there. They're interactive. You can run the reports. You can get PNGs of the charts. You can download some of the data. It's a very useful tool. There's also a tool called Wurfel.js that we have that is free. It provides some very basic information around the device that is requesting a page. It's easy to insert into any sort of web page, and can be integrated very easily in 5 easy steps, as you see here on the right, to Google Analytics. We have thousands of companies all over the world using this product. And if you want rich information there, you can pay for the business edition of Wurfel.js and get many of our popular, what we call device capabilities, descriptions of the device that are even more useful in terms of screen size. Janar, why don't you give a quick explanation of how Wurfel.js is a little different than typical server-side device detection? How is a JS approach different than our what I'll call the standard Wurfel?
Yeah, so Wurfel.js is actually a combination of the server-side world and the client-side world, or what happens inside the browser window. So, for example, in order to properly detect an iPhone model, let's say iPhone 6s or something, you would have to both do proper or server-side device detection using Wurfel, and enrich that information by doing some feature probing or feature tests on the client inside the browser window using JavaScript. So it's you're with Wurfel.js, you're sort of using the best tools, both server side and client side, and with these two worlds joining together, it's actually possible to find or identify the actual model of the iPhones, which Wurfel.js is alone about in the world.
Right. Yeah. And we've done a lot of measurements on the accuracy of this versus server side, and also other competitive ways of doing this, and get over 99% accuracy with the Wurfel.js approach, especially as it results in regards to Apple iPhones, which are notoriously difficult to actually detect, especially without the server-side element here. So speaking of iPhones, let's talk a little bit about the iPhone world. Today, when you look at the iPhones that are out there, and in fact the entire world, the iPhone 6s, which was released several years ago, is still the most used smartphone in the world. At the end of October, the iPhone 6s had 7.53% of the global smartphone usage, and in second place was the iPhone 7. Looking at the bottom here, you can see that in late September, the iPhone 8 was released and started to grow as it was actually shipped. And the iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 8 are the least popular among the ones we've shown here, and ended the quarter, the iPhone 8 Plus at 0.64%, and the iPhone 8 at 0.48. But if you kind of spotlight this iPhone 8 release and take a closer look at it, and compare it to what I'll say their closest competitor, the Samsung Galaxy flagship phone, the S8 and the S8 Plus that were released back in April of 2017, so about 6 months ago. What we did is we took the first 39 days of the iPhone, which is from late September to end of October, and we charted that against the first 39 days of the Samsung S8 phones. And as you can see, it was pretty comparable up until about the month, and the S8 started to trail off a little bit, and the iPhone 8 continues to grow. In general, you can, and not a surprise, the iPhones are very popular phones, and Apple sure knows how to do a launch. And if you look at where the Samsung Galaxy is today, beyond this 39-day window, they are just about at the same level as where the iPhone 8 is after only 39 days. So the iPhone is actually on track to do much better than the Samsung 8. And looking at the market share here, this is an important thing for Apple, because this S8 or S6, I should say, is an older phone. A lot of these people are probably looking for an upgrade, and the question is, do they stick with Apple or go with a competitor? And so there's a lot at stake for the iPhone 8 launch, as there is with the Samsung 8 launch. Okay, we'll continue to track the statistics on the iPhone 8. Looking at image acceleration, we mentioned this earlier, that images are a large part of the reason why mobile device browsing is slow and painful. Looking at images that are sent to mobile smartphones, about 49% of the payload coming to a smartphone is related to images. The other half being HTML, JavaScript, and other web information. But images are easily a half. Some studies put this over 50%. And when you're looking at, there are various ways you can compress and make your website faster by compressing the images. What we did is we ran this through a demo tool. We evaluated 3,151 websites to analyze the impact that what would happen if you took those websites and put their payload through a tool that combined three things: device detection with image resizing and distributed it via a content delivery network. The impact that we showed was that you would get about a 57% savings if you do device detection and know the device and can tailor the image to the size of that device, and also tailor it to the file formats that are optimal for that device. So for example, if you're going to an Android smartphone, you would use, instead of, say, a JPEG, which might be large and not necessarily compressed, you can use the WebP format, which is more efficient, or also like JPEG or PNG, which tend to be larger file formats. So a 57% savings on average across those over 3,000 websites. And that resulted in a 16% savings in terms of web page load time, which can actually be several seconds and make a large difference in the experience. And in many cases, if you invoked a CDN on top of this, you'd get an even greater savings in terms of the web page load time. Jonan, do you want to add anything there?
No, yeah, it's pretty impressive, the impact images have on the experience people get from browsing a web page. And yeah, handling the images correctly is a low-hanging fruit. Most of the content like we see here is in terms of bytes is images. And with image engine, it's very easy to optimize. It sort of offloads the work you need to do, or would otherwise have to do during development time. Decide on the breakpoints and which sizes do you want to be served of the images to which viewport sizes and so on. Image engine will handle this automatically for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, the image payload reduction is dramatic, like we see, and the diagram next where it says 16% steady might not sound that much, but it's actually quite significant too. There are multiple studies out there showing that basically every single millisecond that you can shave off loading time on a web page or even in a native app actually shows at your in your business metrics in terms of cart size and increased revenue and pages per session and all those business metrics.
Yeah, and the common response I get when I talk to developers about this is, we do responsive web design. Don't we do this today? And in general, we find that even with responsive websites, a lot of the times the way breakpoints are set either don't necessarily accommodate and tailor images correctly, or they can get fooled and they end up serving much larger images or more images than they need to, and just push everything downstream and let the client, let the phone, the tablet figure out what the right size is. So, okay. Moving on to portrait orientation. One of the questions we had based upon last quarter's research, we looked at if you're a smartphone or a mini tablet or a full-sized tablet, how is the device held when you start using it? And we have ways to test this. And one of the things that was brought back to us was, how does this vary based upon your operating system? So in other words, like if you have an iPhone, or are you more prone to be holding it in a portrait orientation or landscape orientation versus an Android user? One of the reasons for this was the launch of the iPhone X has, Leonard, what do they call it? The cutout? What are they calling the little the little hub that's in there?
Yeah. The nudge, was it that?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
right. Because people were concerned that this interferes with the screen, especially when it's in landscape layout. And looking at this, though, you can see that the blue are the iPhones. Two things: that the iPhones are almost all the time used in portrait orientation initially. Especially as you get to some of the larger ones, the iPhone 6 Plus, the iPhone 8 Plus, 98% of the time you're in portrait orientation, at least initially. With Android, there tends to be a lower tendency toward this. There's a slightly more landscape usage. I don't have a good explanation for why that is, but in regards to the cutout issue, I think we've decided that it's not that big of a deal, at least initially, for navigation and user experience for most iPhone users. That iPhone X cutout will be at the top of the screen in portrait orientation and not necessarily interfering. If you look at what I'll call the mini tablets in the 7 to 9 range, you see an interesting departure here, that iPhone, iPads and iPad minis, or iPad minis in particular, are this smaller blue line, and only 36% of the time are they in portrait mode. the inverse of that, 64% of the time they're in landscape mode. Um, Whereas when you look at the Android, it's almost the reverse. 68% of the time, the smaller mini size Androids are in a portrait mode. Uh, I will speculate here that I think that a lot of these minis or the Android uh, that are in this side, the 7 to 8 to and 8 to 9, tend to be used as readers, and therefore uh, a lot of the time they're held in a portrait mode. Apparently, the iPad Mini isn't used as a reader as much as some of these what I'll call purpose-built Androids are at this size range. This starts to change a little bit as you get into the what I'll call the full-size tablets, the 9-inch and above tablets. And as you get to the iPad Pro size, the 11-inch and above, you're almost 70% of the time you're in landscape mode. The larger the device gets, the more likely you are to be in landscape mode. All right, moving on to virtual reality. And virtual reality and augmented reality are growing in popularity. There's a lot of work being done both in the gaming and the business sector on ways to apply virtual reality or augmented reality. And typically, they're purpose-built applications that provide some of the services associated with virtual reality or augmented reality. But there is support in browsers, and we wanted to take a quick look at how browsers might be ready for the virtual reality or augmented reality world. And one of the things we looked at was the support for web VR. What we found was the Microsoft products were much more likely to support this when you look at the support of versions that are actually used out in the world. 67% of Microsoft Edge browsers, the releases that are out there, support WebVR. But some of the big players like Google Chrome and Android and Safari are not supporting WebVR at this time. I think the Google Chrome for Android does support a browser version that has readiness for Google Daydream, which is a VR-related product. But it's a pretty small slice, and I wouldn't call that full web VR support. Jonar, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a pretty interesting topic, VR and AR. So yeah, what we did for this report is to basically check the presence of the WebVR API in the browsers. Yeah, you don't strictly need the API to actually make VR experiences in the browser. There are polyfills or plugins sort of emulating the APIs, but then at a poorer performance. So we looked at the native implementation of the VR API in the browsers, and in the Microsoft space, Microsoft Edge and IE only supports this in what they call mixed reality devices. So you basically need something more than just your mobile phone here. You need some goggles of some sort. Microsoft implemented this from version 15 of the Edge browser, which was launched in April. For Firefox, it's been available since version 55, which was in August. So it's still very, very early. Firefox even implemented support, or are about to implement support for this in their iOS browser. Currently only available in nightly builds. Yeah, what about Google? Like it says here, it's it's supported through the Google Daydream goggles, or Google Daydream Ready devices, which was launched in September. So that's not too long ago. So right now, it's you need to sort of enable this API in your settings in your browser, basically, and the hardware support is limited. So that's the reason why there's very little or no support in the for Google Chrome. But still, it's we'll probably need to revisit this half a year from now, and I bet the picture will be completely different.
And one of our experts pointed out to us that WebRTC was also a tool that is frequently used. So we might look into support for WebRTC amongst browsers in the next quarter report. But yeah, as Jon said, this is early games for virtual reality and augmented reality, and who knows, maybe in the next couple of years we'll be doing our webinar in virtual reality. We'll have charts you can walk around the table and look at the charts. Okay, great. JPEG 2000. This is a file format that, Jonar, why don't you talk a little bit about JPEG 2000 and XR, and what its benefits are and what its use cases are. It's kind of both are formats that have been out there for a while, go ahead.
Yeah, so JPEG 2000 is where to begin to talk about JPEG 2000. It says JPEG, but it's actually nothing like JPEG at all. It's it's closer to video format than the good old JPEG. JPEG 2000 has historically been used for archiving purposes, in the engineering business, where documenting drawings, that kind of stuff, and it has quite a few good features when it comes to still providing enough detail, but at a low file size. Safari, the desktop browser from Apple, has actually been supporting JPEG 2000 since 2010, and in iOS it was introduced in 2012, which is quite a long time ago. But neither of these browsers actually advertise their support for JPEG 2000. So the adoption in the web space has been close to zero. But what we see in our image engine product and our experimentation with that is that JPEG 2000 for iOS devices provides significant savings in terms of bytes, and is able to keep the visual quality at a high level of image. So with image engine, we're serving JPEG 2000 to iOS and Safari browsers, and this is shown by the pie charts here. It's basically iOS applications that are supporting JPEG 2000. The mobile Safari, of course, is the browser on the default browser on iOS, and all these other Facebook on iOS, Google Chrome mobile on iOS, and there's the Google search application on iOS. They're all using web views inside the provided by the SDK from Apple. So that's the reason why these also support JPEG 2000.
Great.
So but all in all, it's a very good excuse me, a very good format, highly efficient, provides good quality at a low file size. And JPEG XR, that's closer to JPEG actually than JPEG 2000. And this one is sort of Microsoft answer to the lack of features in JPEG, in the JPEG standard, so to speak. And it's similar here to JPEG 2000. We see that JPEG XR for Microsoft Edge or the Internet Explorer part of the world is a much better pick when it comes to byte size versus visual quality of an image and the ratio there. So yeah, for JPEG 2000, it's basically Safari and iOS are supporting this, and we see for JPEG XR, it's Microsoft Edge and Microsoft IE.
Right.
And JPEG XR is also a quite old image format. It was introduced in Internet Explorer in 2013, but still it hasn't sort of caught on. But in Image Engine, when we're doing automatic device detection and yeah, then we know which devices actually support the different formats, and we're able to pick the best, most suitable format for the specific device. And yeah, JPEG XR is one of them.
Great. Okay. Moving on to Indonesia. Every quarter we pick a different country to highlight, and this quarter we chose Indonesia. In looking at the form factor breakdown, Indonesia is a much more mobile prone country. I remember when I was doing research on Indonesia several years ago, they often described it as a kind of a leapfrog environment where people, as the internet was rolling out, it quickly was supported by the mobile side of the house, and people moved to a mobile browsing experience much without really investment in desktops. And so you can see that in the numbers that are here, that there's almost 60%, 57% of all browsing that goes on in Indonesia is related to smartphones, and only 36% is related to desktop. In the United States, it's over 50% of traffic is desktop related. The rest being smartphone and tablet. Interestingly, feature phones, we often kind of thought that, developing countries are where a lot of the feature phones are. That tends to be moving away these days, that even developing countries like Indonesia have moved on to the smartphone world, and feature phones represent only around 1% of the browsing traffic. Not to say that there aren't feature phones out there, but they aren't used for browsing. And looking at the top smartphones and top tablets, the U.S. tends to be one of the largest markets for Apple devices. You can see that with the green. And we tend to be, in the United States, a what I'll call a blockbuster mentality, that we buy a lot of the same phones. There isn't a lot of there isn't a lot of distribution amongst different models and different manufacturers. iPhone and Samsung tend to have a duopoly here. The flip side of this is that Indonesia has a lot of smaller manufacturers in the top smartphone realm. They do have Apple iPhones and some of the Samsung Galaxy devices, but there are also things like the Oppo devices, and also on the tablet side, there tends to be there's higher penetration of the Samsung tablets, and also some smaller manufacturers. From an OS perspective, much higher penetration of Android devices. Over 83% of the smartphone operating systems are related to Android, compared to the United States, where almost over 50% of devices are driven by Apple's iOS. And in terms of connection type, if you look at the connection type, there are significantly more higher usage of cellular connections as opposed to Wi-Fi connections in Indonesia. The over 60% of the time you're using the cellular network in Indonesia, as opposed to in the US, you're much more prone to get onto your Wi-Fi router for speed, convenience, reception issues. This is a bit of the reinforcement of that statement that the leapfrog to mobile has made the cellular network in Indonesia pretty indispensable. All right. That's it in terms of our spotlight reports. You can download the MOVR report today from Sencha Mobile's MOVR page. And you can get more information there. We list out things like the top smartphones. As I had mentioned before, the iPhone 6 is the world's most popular ones, and you can see both the popularity from continent to continent and the change in that popularity. You can see, for example, that the iPhone 6 is starting to dwindle away in terms of its popularity and being picked up by, in most cases, another Apple phone, the iPhone 7. I suspect the next time we look at this, the iPhone 8. It's hard to say that if it would make the top 20 devices, but we'll certainly take a look at that. We look at the tablets, and we also look at the operating system changes. The iOS had released back at the same time, roughly, as the iPhone 8 release. The version 11 came out of iOS, and very quickly has started to pick up market share. Almost all devices with iOS are on 95% or 94%, I should say, are on version 10 or above when it comes to iOS, which is a great success for Apple in terms of keeping people on recent operating systems. Android has a significant problem in terms of fragmentation. Even though we are currently at version 8 of Android, only a very small percentage of people are on that, and the distribution from legacy, legacy, but also I would almost call version 4 legacy these days. They still have pretty significant market share. So we'll keep track of this and see how it changes as we go forward. That's it for the webinar section. If you have questions, feel free to type them in to the panel that is provided in the webinar, and we will attempt to answer them either here or we'll get back to you with an answer. Likewise, if you have information that you'd like research for future reports, we're very open to suggestions in that regards. Virtual reality was one of those things that we were looking at. Not seeing any questions at this point. Give a couple more seconds. Jonar, do you want to add anything? Have you ordered your iPhone X yet?
No, I haven't ordered my iPhone X yet, but I probably will. I'm on iPhone 6 actually, so it's about time.
Yeah. Likewise, I'm an Android person, and it's time for me to upgrade also. So okay.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any questions at this stage, so I'd like to thank everybody. You can go and download the webinar or the mover report that's available now from Central Mobile at www.centralmobile.com/mover MOVR, and the page there will have a download button for the Q3 report. Likewise, if you're interested in historic reports, there are a backlog of library there that you can look through. Lots of great information that we've built up over the last 3 years on this. Okay, well, thank you, Jon, and I'll talk to you later on.
Thank you, Ken.
And thank you to
Talk
everybody
to you later.
that's tuned in. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.